strategically. The goal of today's session is to discuss the many factors that are involved in taking a strategic approach to your philanthropy. So as David just mentioned, I am delighted to introduce my Foundation Source colleagues, Elizabeth Wong and Peter Handler, who will be helping to facilitate the breakout sessions and also the question and answer portion at the end of the workshop. Please feel free to write your questions in the question and answer chat section that's throughout the presentation, and we'll get to those questions at the end. So please note too that prior to entering this session, there is a link to our worksheets. These worksheets are meant to serve as something for you, a tool for you to use along in this session or to complete afterwards. The worksheets are going to enable you to insert your own individual and foundation strategic goals and activities. Okay, so as we get started, let's consider a few statistics to get a sense of how or where your family or corporate philanthropy plays in the field. Last year, Americans gave nearly $450 billion to charity. So how does that break down into family and corporate foundations? Well, by 2014, there were more than 40,000 family foundations in the United States, and that's roughly half of all private foundations. 17% of last year's total giving, that $450 billion number, 17% came from private foundations. And there were more than 2,600 corporate foundations. 5% of last year's total giving in the United States came from corporations. So all this to say that all of you at this workshop who are representing corporate or family foundations, or you're contemplating establishing a foundation, you represent part of a substantial and very important group within the philanthropic sector. So all foundations have different approaches to their grant making. So let's look at a few of those. There's legacy grant making, which is a means for a foundation, which it uses typically a family foundation to honor the existence of a founder, the memory of a founder or director who may have had a long-standing relationship with a grantee organization or a passion for addressing a particular community need or topic. A legacy grant is a vehicle, as I said, typically used by a family foundation to perpetuate the express wishes of a foundation leader or continue with a program focus, a particular focus. These grants can span multiple years, representing a solid relationship and commitment to the goals and the work of the grantee. So in stark contrast, there is discretionary giving, and this offers an individual approach for directors to address their personal interests or passions. Discretionary giving provides an opportunity for directors to be responsive in real time, whether it's an appeal from a friend or a catastrophic event, or perhaps a longstanding relationship, for example, an alma mater. Board members also can use their discretionary giving to join with other directors to combine their allotted funds toward an organization of mutual interest and personal connection. And then finally, the subject of today's event is strategic giving. And this kind of giving typically involves a deeper level of planning and preparation, both in determining a program focus and the selection of the grantee. The goal here is about determining upfront what kind of impact you want to have in the world and developing a plan to get there. So there is no one way to do this work. Most foundations consider using all of these methods in making grants. However, today, as I said, we're focusing on strategic grant making and answering a few key questions. So what does this kind of giving entail? How does a private foundation engage in strategic grant making? And why build your philanthropy strategically? We are going to look forward to the breakout session when we get a chance to learn a little bit more about your philanthropy. This will be a time for you to share a few of your own examples or come with questions regarding these 3 different kinds of giving. So let's first define what it means to be strategic. There are typically stages or components to being strategic. We could say that it is simply defining the goal, researching and determining the approach, and making your move. But strategy can also be complex and multi-layered. It requires strategic thinking, strategic planning, and strategic implementation. Strategic thinking is about taking the time to think creatively about your foundation's role in addressing a community or societal need. Define your goals and determine what future success looks like. Then there's strategic planning, which moves your stated goals and your objectives into a plan which identifies the problem. It provides a means to reach a solution and defines a timeline to getting there. Developing this plan builds assurance that your objectives will be achieved as you prescribed. And finally, strategic implementation. Now it's time to implement your plan and move it into action. Strategic implementation is about determining how to make your move in order to successfully reach your goals and calculate how to measure your success. So what are some of the key factors to look for in building a successful strategic philanthropy? Let's consider program focus, which includes setting your goals, defining the problem and the solution, and establishing a budget to make a successful impact. Grant-making approach, which considers the many factors that determine what kind of a grant maker you are in order to adhere to your purpose and your values and to achieve your program goals. Funding preferences will have us exploring those characteristics that make your foundation unique and help define which of the many paths it can take towards reaching its program goals. And finally, measuring impact. This will have us discussing all the elements involved in evaluating whether you are reaching your goals. So let's start from the top and work our way towards measuring impact. In order to be strategic with your philanthropy, let's begin with a discussion of program focus. Let's consider program focus as the first key element as we build our structure for giving. So as you explore your foundation's program focus, you might want to look at a few important components. These include setting your program goals, which will serve as a guide for your philanthropy. Defining the problem and the solution. This is going to narrow down your path. And determining your budget, your grant-making budget. This will further the nature and the scope of your program activities to ensure success in reaching your program goals. So let's start with establishing those goals. Goals provide the overall direction for your foundation's program focus. Think of them like the North Star for your philanthropy. Start with discussing common concerns, what foundation leadership really cares about and is fully committed to achieving. Ask and define what keeps you up at night. What is something that the foundation really wants to change? What would a better world look like? Goals need to be flexible and open to learning from the field. And as you go along, you may need to make adjustments based on the knowledge that you gain. So when your foundation first delves into an issue area, it's probably safe to say that others have tried to solve it before you. So that's great news, actually. It means that there will be a lot of philanthropic experience, research, and data to learn from. And it will give your foundation an opportunity to identify its own niche in the sector. So start with developing a plan for deeper learning. Get to know the experts and the leaders in the field that have probably been grappling with this issue for years. Learn from their experience, their knowledge, to help determine the best way to solve the problem at hand. Ask them some key questions. For example, what are the critical challenges confronting your chosen topic? What are the perceived solutions in addressing these challenges? And how much is needed to bring a solution to the problem? Is there a way to isolate the problem and or the solution, either geographically or through a target population to make a significant impact? So next, we want to establish a grant-making budget. Establishing a grant-making budget enables you to target your funds as you address a specific need. Determine first how much is available within the foundation's grant distribution budget to address the specific problem at hand. If you're considering more than one program area or issue, determine how much is available within each grant distribution program bucket. Next, learn what is the cost of the solution and how much can you be a part of that solution. You will need to define a solution that fits within your budget. So no doubt on this, as a foundation, you want to be successful in reaching the goals that you've laid out. But what if the amount available and the amount needed for a solution, which you've determined through all of your research, what if those two numbers don't match? There's a number of approaches that you can take to reach your desired outcomes. So before knowing which avenue to take, though, to reach your desired goals, I recommend that a foundation first do a little internal exploration of its funding preferences. Let's talk next about those preferences, or what I coin as a grantmaker's style. So what kind of grantmaker do you want to be? There are so many traits or characteristics to explore that determine how your foundation is unique. Consider a few here. For example, how about your foundation's tolerance for risk? And I'm not talking about asset management here. How comfortable is the foundation standing out among other donors in the field? And consider the board's desire to target a specific grantee size or level of complexity. And consider the foundation's desire to be proactive versus reactive in reaching out to the community and supporting programs that are in keeping with the foundation's goals. So let's start with risk. How comfortable is your foundation with risk? This topic manifests in several ways. For example, is the foundation comfortable working with new organizations? Or would you prefer grantees that have a proven track record of success? Is the foundation comfortable working with financially unstable organizations, even though they may have positive attributes like leadership or staff or program success? Is the foundation comfortable partnering with organizations where leadership is new or in transition? And how about working with small or grassroots organizations that may rely on a different donor base, individuals and local donors, for example, which could be less stable in a poor economy? Or they might have budgets that are not typically robust enough to weather annual income fluctuations. Finally, how comfortable is the foundation in working with large organizations with multiple funding partners? They might appear stable and quite sustainable, but are you confident that your grant dollars will make a difference? So next, ask, how visible do you want your foundation giving to be? Does the foundation want to be a major, significantly sized donor to an organization, or do you want to blend with other donors at a lower level of support? The answer often depends on how important is it to lead when looking at other donor giving to the same organization. This could mean serving as a benchmark for others to aspire to, or an opportunity to advocate for a grantee by setting a standard for a foundation colleague or colleagues to communicate and learn and support. How much involvement or deep a relationship does the foundation want to have with a grantee? A larger connection to a grantee might mean serving on the grantee's board of directors or on an advisory or fundraising committee. So these deeper relationships Also might encourage multi-year grants as an expression of confidence in the program or a desire to make a long-term commitment. That way, you're going to learn at a deeper or closer level about a problem being addressed. So, nonprofit organizations come in all sizes and levels of complexity. So, it's helpful for a foundation to identify that sweet spot where the organization contains the right combination of components to meet the foundation's funding goals. Those components might include the size of the organization's overall budget. This is it could be a small organization with a budget of less than $100,000, or it could be a mid-size organization with a budget of less than $1 million or $5 million, or it could be much larger. Another component includes geographic scope. Is the organization addressing challenges at the local, regional, or international level? Program complexity. Is the organization managing one program or project, or is it operating at several tiers in addressing an issue? Grantees might range from small local programs with a singular focus to large national or multinational organizations responsible for multiple programs and activities. Consider where in the spectrum your foundation fits. And note that it might not just be one place, but perhaps a selection of organizations across different categories, depending upon where your program focus and goals are. How do you want to initiate a connection with a potential grantee? So how much control does the foundation want in determining who applies for support? There's a couple of options here. First is the open process, building a platform that defines the problem and the solutions that you seek and establishing an open application process. I call this building it and they will come. So the pros are that you get a wide selection of funding options, and that can be really terrific. However, the concerns among foundations for this method are that there will be too many proposals and there's not enough resources to properly evaluate the best candidates. Or conversely, that there will not be enough applicants to make the selection process competitive. And perhaps the best organizations to solve the problem might not be aware that the application opportunity is available. The other option is a closed process, and you're being more selective right up front here. If you are meeting several issue area experts and leaders within the nonprofit community, the foundation might already know who it wants to work with, and therefore it's going to solicit an application directly. So the good thing is, by the time a proposal is solicited, the foundation has a strong sense of the applicant's strengths, its weaknesses, and its ability to meet the foundation's program goals. The downside might be that this can be quite labor intensive and would require a commitment from leadership and staff, if there is any, to do their research. So after you've determined the foundation's preferences for risk, for visibility, for grantee size and complexity, and a proactive, reactive approach, let's go back to that earlier conundrum I mentioned when the needs of the field might not match the foundation's budget. Let's bring all that we've learned together and consider the best way to achieve your program goals. Let's explore some options, for example. So for those comfortable with risk and serving as an outstanding leader in the field, maybe there's a way to stand out in the field and consider solutions in a new direction, perhaps funding a unique niche in solving a problem. For those more risk-averse and eager to work with others toward a common and proven solution, consider joining forces with other like-minded donors. And for those who want to tackle a large geographic issue like global warming, but have a relatively small budget and you want to be a significant donor for your grantees, consider a more bite-sized, local or regional set of grantee relationships that bring you one step closer to a positive outcome. So at this time, we are all going to meet in the breakout session rooms for exactly 8 minutes, and then I will meet you back here to share what we've learned. Thank you.
Okay, I'm setting people up for those rooms right now, and we'll see you in 8 minutes.
vacation with family wealth with my girls who are 17 and 18, about to go to college. So probably budgeting is coming up, some more autonomy and independence is
time. Thank you very much. This was very interesting.
It's kind of shocking. It brings people right out with no warning. So the breakouts are over.
Okay. Super interesting.
Everyone's back in the room, Robin.
Everyone's back in the room. Okay. Hi, everyone. We are back. So Peter, I don't know, David, Elizabeth, I'm not sure if you were in the room. What did everybody learn?
I'm happy to start with legacy, if that would make sense.
Fantastic.
We had a great conversation around different ways that family or foundations have arrived at their legacy grant making. And in two cases, it was really through a long history in the expertise of the family business. In one case, it was journalism. In another case, it was journalism and media. And in another case, it was around medical research. Both of those foundations have anchored their foundation work in those issue areas. It's where they have tremendous amount of expertise, and they also have great passion around these topics. Another interesting aspect of it, however, is that with those anchors established, there's been room for some of the new participants, the new generations in their foundations, to explore other areas.
Terrific. Peter, how'd you make out?
We had a discussion about discretionary grant making, about the sort of the pros and the cons, and how it can be a way to encourage participation from board members, or it can be a way to move past, if there's an impasse on the board board can't come to a collective decision, and also talked about how discretionary grant making can perhaps muddle your message to the outside if you have multiple board members granting in multiple areas or regions. And you can also lose the opportunity to have sort of bonding of the group and collective action. One of the participants in the breakout room, curiously enough, talked about, and the board he works with, that they have used discretionary grant making in a strategic fashion, by being able to step back, notice what the board is giving to individually, and help the board see how they are granting in similar areas, and then come to some collective decision.
Fantastic. I like that connection. And I was in the room where we were talking a little bit more about strategic philanthropy and giving some examples of what that looked like. And in both the examples that we talked about, they were with a corporate voice. And one of the strategic goals that was not mentioned earlier was about engaging the employees and bringing them front and center with the connection. One was reaching out to the schools where employees might have their kids and addressing those needs. Another one was even more relaxed than that, and having employees bring projects to the philanthropic division to really discern what works best. But there have been no issues of risk with either case. There's, setting budgets has been important for one, but not necessarily the other. We talked a little bit about reporting, and all in all, it was very interesting, though, to hear the corporate goals are such an important piece to remember about this and the connection for employees. So we are getting very dangerously close to running out of time, and I want to finish up with measuring our impact. So let's just spend a few minutes on some of the important factors to consider. So first, defining clear goals and metrics. Let's look at what some of the best ways are to measure impact for your needs. Depending upon your goals and your needs, this could range from a thank you letter to an in-depth quantitative report. Next, examine who best determines metrics. Is it the foundation? Is it the grantee? It might even be an outside advisor or some kind of specialist or expert in an area. Also, consider introducing metrics at the beginning of a partnership or a program, which that can result in everyone having the same expectations throughout. Next, another important factor is being able to respond quickly when the need is greatest. So by working closely with the grantees and other field experts, by listening to stakeholders, by developing your tailored solutions and learning from metrics along the way, you are able to deliver a fast response when the need is greatest. When have we seen this more than ever is in 2020, when we've got hit with a pandemic and now an economic downturn. Philanthropy has had to move fast in many cases to address the changing needs of their grantees. And finally, maximizing your impact. Consider your original goals. Did you hit your mark? As a result of researching your niche, finding good partners, building trusted relationships, foundations can learn from past efforts and revise their approach. So now it all comes full circle, right? So consider using results to inform your decision-making on future philanthropic activities and relationships. As you can see here, after measuring your impact, you have those results informing program focus, informing funding preferences and grant-making approach as you continue your work. So it's a fantastic circle to live with, and it just goes on and on. So thank you for being with us. And do we have time for any questions?
I think we need to get ourselves, we want to stay cognizant of everyone's time, Robin.
Gotcha. Okay.
Fantastic. I wanted to thank everyone for participating in the breakouts and thank everyone for their time and attention today. We start tomorrow at 11 a.m. Eastern Time. We have a closing keynote address with a family business executive who is also the head of their single family office and how he balances those roles. And then we end our main stage with a pretty fascinating conversation, I think, about what 2021 and beyond looks to hold economically, especially for family businesses. We have a couple of optional workshops on family offices and on trusts where you can ask any questions that you may have about those. And then we'll put a close to the session. So with that, I'd like to put a close to today and thank you all very, very much yet again. And we will see you tomorrow. Thank you, Peter, Robin, Elizabeth. This was terrific.
Thank you, David.